Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. This is the Transformative Climate Communities Introductory Application Workshop, which is being hosted in collaboration with Estelano Advisors and Farallon Strategies. Happy that you could all join us today. We'll go ahead and give it one more minute just to let folks keep trickling in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Great. So again, welcome to the Transformative Climate Communities Introductory Application Workshop. Before we dive into the application portion of the program and all the overviews, we'll go ahead and start with some logistics and housekeeping items. So with that, I'll pass it over to Michael to get us started.
Thank you. Go ahead, Christina.
All right, so just a reminder to everyone that this presentation is being recorded for educational purposes. If you have any questions or comments, please use the raise hand function, or you can put it directly into the chat box. Use of your camera is optional, but we do encourage it when speaking. Please make sure that when you're not speaking, you're muted, and unmute when you want to weigh in. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties or having any logistical trouble, please reach out to Joannie at estelanoadvisors.com. The recording, handouts, and workshop resources are all going to be available after the session, and you can expect a follow-up email with the intake survey and additional next steps. Next slide, please. And our agenda for today. So we'll start with an overview of the TCC program, then we'll do an overview and timeline of the application process. After that, we'll hear from some previous grantees and their experience with the program and application. Next, we'll have an interactive Jamboard session on preparation for round 5. And lastly, we'll have breakout sessions for questions and answers.
Next slide. Thank you, Christina. So we have several top-level learning objectives for today, including learning about the Transformative Climate Communities programs. We'll have a couple of different sections we can break out to depending on your familiarity with TCC. We're going to learn from other applicants about their experiences with the TCC application process. Different applicants have had different experiences, so we'll hear some real stories today about their experiences, and then prepare and strategize for round 5, the TCC program. So we're really excited for you to be here. Please do send any questions, comments, or feedback on today's event to tcc@sgc.ca.gov.
Great. Thank you, Michael and Christina. So we'll begin with some welcome and introductions. Again, thank you all again for joining. It is really great to see a lot of interest in this program and this workshop specifically. So we will go ahead and start with introductions. We ask all attendees if you can add your name, your organization, and maybe one thing that you hope to get out of the session in the chat, that would be great. And I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Ana Cuevas Flores, and I am an associate with Estelano Advisors. And just to give you a sense of our role on the team, Estelano Advisors is one of the lead coordinators of the TCC Technical Assistance Team, and part of the larger technical assistance team as well. Collectively, we are a third-party team of consultants, organizations, and firms that provide technical assistance for the TCC program. Our firm, Estelano Advisors, have been involved with the TCC program since round 5 and are happy to continue through the next rounds. But we do not do this alone. With the lead TA team, we also have ARUP and CivicWell. And then we also have a group of more specialized technical assistance providers, including Enterprise on the housing side, CDRG on the GHC side, California Coalition for Rural Housing, National Indian Justice Center, California Relief, and Farallon Strategies. So today you will get to hear from 2 of those teams, so us, Estelano Advisors, and Farallon Strategies. So with that, I'll pass it over to my colleagues at EA to introduce himself. I'll pass it over to Riley.
Thanks, Anna. My name is Riley O'Brien. I'm a senior analyst with Estelano Advisors and part of the project management team for the technical assistance team. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Richard.
Thanks, Riley. Hi, folks. Richard France. I'm a principal at Estelano Advisors, and I'm working alongside Anna, Riley, and the rest of the TA team to deliver technical assistance for the program. With that, I will turn it over to our partners at Fairlawn Strategies.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, everybody. Michael McCormick, President and founder of Fairlawn Strategies. And we're excited to be a climate adaptation advisor, climate advisor more generally on the TCC TA work here. And we have a long history in working in TA programs across the state. Excited to continue that through the TCC work. So handing it over to Christina.
Hi, everyone. Christina Oraftik, Project Associate at Fairlawn Strategies. Also very excited to be on the Climate Adaptation Advisory team here. Thank you all for joining us today.
And I did want to also introduce another colleague from Estelano Advisors, Joannie.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Joannie, and I'm a research analyst with Estelano Advisors and also supporting the rest of the team.
Great. Thank you all for your introductions. And feel free to continue to add your introductions into the chat as we continue this conversation. Okay, so next slide. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Strategic Growth Council team so that they can introduce themselves and kick us off with the program overview.
Great. So hello, everybody. Can y'all hear me? Thumbs up, seeing that. Okay, cool. My name is Jerry Rivero, joined today by my TCC colleagues, Sarah Newsham and Jess Eisen, who are also on this call. I'll let them introduce themselves before we go into the TCC program overview. So Sarah, Jess.
Hi all, Sarah Newsham. Thanks for being here. I am a program associate on the TCC team at SGC, supporting technical assistance. I'll pass to Jess.
Hi everyone, I am Jess. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a program associate, and I will also be helping with technical assistance. And then I think Anna Jane is also on the call. Anna Jane, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey y'all, I'm Anna Jane. I'm a program analyst with the SGC team at the Transformative Climate Communities program. Nice to have you all here.
Awesome, thank you all. So again, we'll be giving a brief overview of the program, and then staff who you just met today will be available to take questions in the breakout rooms at the end of the presentation. So again, we all work for the Transformative Climate Communities program, which is a grant program administered by the Strategic Growth Council. We can go to the next slide, please. So who is SGC? SGC is a council made up of state agencies tasked with coordinating activities aimed at supporting the planning and development of sustainable communities with the vision of building healthy, thriving, and resilient communities for all. One of the ways we work to accomplish this is through the administration of grant programs, one of which is the Transformative Climate Communities program. Furthermore, we'd like to note that the Strategic Growth Council is committed to achieving racial equity in its operations, investments, and policy initiatives, and to achieve its vision for racial equity in which all people in California live in healthy, thriving, and resilient communities, regardless of race. Another thing we'd like to note for today's presentation, in addition to sharing information about the program, we're here today to also take input from you and feedback on it. TCC has built itself upon community input and constantly looking towards ways to improve and better serve the needs of the folks on the ground. So today we hope to take feedback and input, and then there will be other opportunities to provide that for folks. Next slide, please. So we'll give a quick TCC program overview. But before we begin, we would like to note that through this presentation, we will be using the term disadvantaged communities, taken from Cal EPA, which defines disadvantaged communities as census tracts with high pollution and socioeconomic burdens. We recognize that the term disadvantaged does not fully account for the existing strengths, assets, and efforts at the local level that have long made communities resilient. So with that said, what is TCC? So TCC was created following legislation in 2016 aimed at funding neighborhood level transformative climate community plans and projects. The goals of the program include providing economic, environmental, and health benefits to disadvantaged communities through community-driven multi-benefit projects while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So TCC provides two types of grants, both planning and implementation grants. A little bit about planning grants. They fund planning engagement and capacity building activities supporting specific community needs. These also serve to serve a potential buildup to the pursuit of a TCC implementation grant or other implementation funding. Planning grants should be tailored to whatever activities the community needs, and we'll go through this in a little bit more detail, as long as they are aligned with the overall goals of TCC. Late last month, the council voted to approve our round 4 awards, including 7 total planning grants of up to $300,000 each. We had our first awards to tribal communities, as well as to unincorporated communities, which has been an area of growth for the program beginning in round 4. As far as implementation grants, those are larger in scale and have more specific requirements around transformational projects and programming. Round 4 included 3 awards of up to $35 million each. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we've been in the process of, again, this idea of program improvements for TCC in that community input process, working on increasing access as a program, working on increasing access for all communities. And then these are the updates we're working for and looking for the guidelines in round 5. So in an effort to improve access to TCC funds, we have been incorporating feedback to the round 5 guidelines from input from past applicants, application TA providers that are on this call, and through outreach opportunities like the one today. We would like to highlight that the current draft guidelines will be released in mid-November. That's this month, right? Sometime in the middle of this month. And we will encourage your feedback on these once they are released. Also, if you don't get to provide feedback, we also remind folks that we are always open to feedback. And there are several touch points and opportunities to provide this. And then as a plug, we'll want to remind folks to sign up for our email list to get notified of upcoming communications, including the release of the round 5 guidelines coming up. Next slide, please. Next slide, I think we have an example on some of the potential projects or plans. And these are related to basic infrastructure, regional services, and job centers. And then really the program is making sure that this specific example, making sure that all communities have access to basic environmental infrastructure and access to job centers and community resources. Transportation is already funded through TCC, and 10% of TCC funds can go to helping communities provide basic environmental infrastructure. Next slide. So as we've said, we'd like to highlight that this program also is transformative and flexible and driven from community-led visioning and transformational processes. The program encourages big out-of-the-box thinking for projects or programming that may be unique to your community. The community engagement and input is a key component from the visioning process all the way through the implementation of projects and plans. Next slide, please. We'll go over some of the key components for TCC. There are several, but there are several that set it apart from other programs across the state. These include a community-driven, place-based approach with multiple integrated projects with a defined geographic area. All is driven by a collaborative governance, and then what we call the transformative elements aimed at ensuring benefits to residents and businesses of the project area. Again, the program is very flexible and encourages proposals that are tailored to the specific needs of your community. Each TCC grant will look different. This is not a one-size-fits-all model. So we, again, encourage creativity and visioning, which is appropriate for the community context. A little bit more about the integrated projects and strategies. Applicants will select projects aimed at collectively reducing greenhouse gas emissions and support communities in addressing current and future climate impacts. The key is the integration of all of these projects. That is to say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Next slide, please. So partners and stakeholders will come together and decide how they will collectively govern implementation of the grant through the collaborative stakeholder structure, which we'll talk to in a bit. All applications include co-applicants who are working together with the community towards a shared vision. Ideally, TCC supports the development of long-term partnerships at multiple levels beyond the lifespan of the grant. Next slide, please. Here we have an example of what a collaborative stakeholder structure looks like. Again, the governance happens through the grantee as the lead applicant and all the partners being part of that collaborative stakeholder structure. Next slide, please. These next couple of slides will point to the transformative plan. One slide back. I think we might have jumped. There we go. Transformative elements. Transformative elements exist to enhance program objectives and ensure that the proposed strategies and projects provide co-benefits for residents of the proposed project areas. The first three seen here on the slide fund programming through the grant, and applicants must submit a proposal to address each of these elements. The first being community engagement, where applicants will describe future community engagement and ways that feedback from the community will inform project implementation throughout the grant term. Workforce development will develop a workforce development and educational training programs leading to high quality jobs for residents of the project area. Then we have displacement avoidance, which will describe the current vulnerabilities that exist for residents and small businesses of the project area. And then what are the strategies to avoid displacement after the investment. In the next slide, we show some more transformative elements. And these here are more foundational and are intended to be worked into the rest of the projects of the grant. Include climate adaptation and resilience, data collection and indicator tracking, and then leverage funding. The second, I just want to note as well, and we'll get into the weeds on this, but implementation grant applicants must address all of the transformative elements in these past two slides, where planning grant applicants should address at least at minimum one of these elements in some way in their proposal. With that, we gave the quick elevator pitch on TCC, and I think I'll toss it over to Riley.
Great, thank you, Jerry. So now that you've heard a little bit more about the TCC program, we want to give an application overview and review the timeline. So next slide. So before diving into the application components, we want to talk about who is eligible to apply. On this slide here, you will see a list of qualifying applicants, including community-based organizations, local governments, nonprofit organizations, and council of governments, to name a few. It is important to note that either the lead applicant or at least one co-applicant must be a public agency, such as a county government. And it is also important to know that non-recognized tribes that are tribally chartered organizations or 401c3 are also eligible applicants. This will look different across different communities and depend on each applicant's collaborative stakeholder structure. Next slide. And so here we see a list of the multiple innovative projects that TCC funds. And while these project types do not necessarily pertain to planning applicants, this list can be used as a guiding source in thinking about how to strategically propose the grant, and also in thinking ahead of what projects can look like if an implementation grant will be sought in the future. So for implementation grants, applicants will select projects aimed at collectively reducing greenhouse gas emissions and supporting communities in addressing current and future climate impacts. The key here is the integration of the projects. So again, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, as we heard about the community vision. And here on this slide, we see an example of an implementation grant for Stockton Rising. A round 3 implementation grant, which shows integrated projects throughout, including complete street projects, energy and water efficiency, urban greening, and they also address health strategies through an education programming, all within the project area. So the TCC staff and the technical assistance providers want to work with you to figure out how your community needs can fit into these broad project types. And we'd like to note that because of the goals of the program, there must be some GHG reduction. And again, this is pertaining to implementation applicants. But for the most part, the projects here are supporting the community shared vision. So next slide. So now diving into the planning application components, as we take a look at the planning application components, we can see that compared to the implementation grant, these may look a little bit different. So specifically because there is no infrastructure being funded by a planning grant, there is no need for readiness documentation, and there's also no GHG quantification required. However, applicants just have to be ready to plan and prioritize some of the transformative elements depending on which one fits best. Then there's an overall work plan and overall budget for the entire planning grant application. So it's a little less complicated and there's a fewer moving parts compared to an implementation grant. However, we still want to be clear that sometimes this can also be a heavy lift. And we like to be upfront about that and emphasize the differences between the two grants to help people guide to see which one is best according to the community needs. And so with the implementation application components, and again, just want to flag that while we don't have all the details at this time for round 5, since the guidelines have not been released, just looking back at the previous rounds, we can give you a sense of what you could be preparing for. In regards specifically to the implementation application, there are various threshold requirements that you must satisfy, including identifying what your project area will be. And this includes showing some maps, letters of support that must be included as well. There are also narratives for each of the application components, including the project area needs, quantifiable projects, and narratives for all the transformative elements that SGC described earlier today. So along with these projects, for each of these areas, there must also be a work plan, a budget, and for the implementation, there is the requirement of readiness documentation to show that once awarded funds, these projects will be ready for construction and implementation. This is all laid out here sort of to give you an idea of just how much work goes into an implementation grant application, and again, to be able to see the difference between that planning grant. So moving along. So within the implementation grant, it is worth reiterating that proposals for these grants, they must address all 3 of the TCC program objectives and include various components that relate to multiple projects. So it's not just one project that this program is meant to fund, but rather a collective series of projects. The core of all of this should be the community vision statement. The vision statement is one of the core aspects of the application, and it is meant to be really the foundation for the strategies and projects that are selected to be a part of the grant, and how the transformative elements are framed and shaped around the strategies and projects selected. And again, so moving along to the next slide. And again, we acknowledge that, you know, both the planning and implementation grant can be rigorous and, you know, may take a lot of work. So with that, we do have technical assistance provided during the application period. And so technical assistance is required for all implementation grants. So any applicants that are going for the implementation grants will go through a TA process where they will be matched with a technical assistance provider, and they'll get to work with the technical assistance provider in these areas shown on the slide, such as GHG quantification, reviewing transformative elements, partnership engagement, and project alignment and integration, to just name a few here. And then when it comes to planning grants, technical assistance is available for some planning grants. Specifically eligible planning grants include unincorporated and rural communities and tribal entities. So next slide. So when talking about the TCC program and everything that goes into it, TCC can actually provide multiple benefits to communities. Again, TCC aims to empower communities that are most impacted by pollution to enact transformational change by funding multiple innovative projects. The funding can uplift the work that communities are already doing or that they plan to do in the future, to create that community vision and impact in communities. Specifically with planning grant and the funding from the planning grants in particular, some of the benefits that are most notably can be seen in the development of long-term partnerships, as well as preparation for implementation funding, whether that's through the TCC implementation grant or through other funding programs listed here, such as the Community Resilience Centers, Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, and or the Regional Climate Collaboratives Program. So this is not meant to replace those programs, but to give you that kind of work and coordination to be able to apply for those programs as well. Next slide. And so for this upcoming round 5, the draft guidelines have not been released, but they are expected to be released within the next week or so. And then between January and February 2023, we will be hosting, the technical assistance team will be hosting a series of TCC pre-application workshops, which is also part of the pre-application technical assistance available, which we'll talk about a bit more and how you can get involved with this. But just to give you a preview, this includes one-on-one consultations, again, more detailed and specific oriented workshops coming up early next year to help people prep in preparation before the final guidelines are released in February of 2023. And we expect the notice of funding availability to be posted in March, with the pre-proposal submission deadline around April and May, and the final application submission deadline happening in the summer of 2023, with round 5 TCC awards adopted in fall of 2023. So with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Riley.
Thanks, Anna. And we wanted to take this time to put a little bit of a spotlight on the previous and also recently awarded grantees of the first 4 rounds of the TCC program. So we will first be showing a map of the TCC planning grants that have been awarded. So there are several awards per round, and you can see that specifically within round 4, our most recent round, we have had an expansion to other parts of the state that were not previously covered by the TCC planning grant, specifically among tribal and more rural communities. Moving on to an overview of the implementation grant awards, something that's worth noting is that several of these implementation grantees had actually received planning grants in the prior round. So some examples of that include City of Los Angeles and the City of Stockton, City of Oakland, among others, who in future rounds received implementation grant funding. And in the most recent round, there were funding awards provided to community partners covering South Los Angeles, as well as the City of Richmond and the City of Stockton. And we actually have a representative from the City of Stockton on the line today, Grant, who we would like to introduce to speak a bit about the grant that Stockton has been awarded and has begun to implement. Grant, are you on the line?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the City of Stockton has definitely had the longest journey with the TCC program, I dare say, seeing as we've gone from a planning grant to a partial round 3 implementation grant to another partial round 4 implementation grant. So we've definitely kind of had a series of interesting, evolutions through the TCC program. But really, I think Stockton's story kind of speaks to the really flexible and tailored nature of the TCC program, which is what makes it so, I think effective and so advantageous for communities. I've never really worked with any staff or grant that have been more just like accommodating, more interested in making sure that the grant is tailored to fit to your specific situation, to make sure that the projects and programs that are funded speak to that community and that community's needs. And I think really that's the entire, I know there's a lot of kind of technical background you could describe these things with, hearing, staff talk about the planning grant, the implementation grant, all I can think in my brain, my administrative brain, the planning grant's what sets you up for the implementation grant. And the planning grant, the goal is to identify your projects, to make sure that you've adequately heard from your community as to what their needs are, and that you've really studied what the needs are of that community. You've looked at the data. You've also heard from people directly, and then you can show a straight line from what the outcome of your planning grant was to what you want to do in the implementation grant. So that'd be kind of my boiled down version of that, I suppose. In Stockton's case, I actually came on board halfway through the planning grant. So I wasn't here to help develop our planning grant, but I basically took the baton from planning to implementation and sort of led the city's round 3 awards. So yeah, I really saw how all the work they did in the planning grant, specifically in Stockton. We created what we called the Sustainable Neighborhood Plan, which was a very first of its kind in Stockton strategic document that was completely rooted in resident and small business perspectives, and sought to identify what the top community priorities were of like South Stockton in particular. And it was really that foundation that we were able to use when we came to implementation and selecting projects and who we wanted to work with. And, when it came to kind of stating our case, it made it, much, much easier to be able to point to an actual document that says, we capture these perspectives, we talk to people, we've looked at the data, we've looked at Count Bioscreen, and these all align, and everybody is saying the same thing, which is that, this is a community with significant need, and these are the specific needs. And that made sort of our round 3 application, much easier. We, prophetically submitted our round 3 application March 6, 2020. So obviously the world changed a little bit a week after that. So, we ended up with a partial award, in part because the pandemic had caused like a budget shortage. And then also in part because we essentially tied with the city of Riverside, and SGC was gracious enough to extend a partial award to us, even though technically I think we were 3rd place by like less than half a point or something. So they just felt like it was it was too close to not give us anything. So I thank them for that, because it currently funds my job. And we do a lot of work with that grant as it exists, and we fund a lot of programs, and then we sort of use that as a launch pad to go for round 4, which we are still in shock and extremely excited to have been awarded. It's only been I think like 3 or 4 weeks since we found out, so still processing and still trying to get ready. But yeah, that's probably enough rambling for me. I guess I don't know what exactly I can offer in the way of an experience through the TCC process, but it might be easier just to answer questions, or if there's like specific topics you'd like me to speak to, but that's kind of just my context with TCC.
Thank you so much, Grant. No, I think that was a great overview, and it sounds like really a great story of going through this process multiple times of applying, which I know is not easy by any means, but sounds like it's been very rewarding, and definitely one of our success stories of both the planning and implementation grant. And I did want to note, I have a map up of Stockton's, I forget if this is the round 3 or round 4 proposal, but just anything, Grant, that you might want to highlight on this map, or anything else you'd like to add. Before you jump in, I will also just note, if anyone has questions in the chat, we are going to have a breakout Jamboard session and some breakout rooms for Q&A. But if you do have questions in the chat, or if you do have questions now, feel free to add them to the chat. So yeah, Grant, anything else you'd add?
Yeah, that looks like, I believe that's our round 3 map. It was election day this week, and as you can tell, we've created a gerrymandered project area just for this occasion. We made a very specifically tailored project area map that yeah, basically the short explanation is just that all of our projects are more like programs, and they're all very like household centered. So we really made an effort to capture like all the most at need neighborhoods throughout South Stockton that we thought we could capture in that limited sort of 5 square mile area. Sadly, Stockton is, much like many disadvantaged cities, it's very, it's the product of a lot of urban sprawl. So it's very difficult for us to capture everything in a 5 square mile area. I know there are plenty of implementation grantees who, did very focused corridor projects. So hats off to them. I'm sure they've had a much easier time than we have as far as trying to work within that 5 square mile boundary. Basically, what I mean by that is I know there's a few, I think, who really focus on like affordable housing development and then some transit that's attached to that. So, very much easy to capture in a 5 square mile area, as opposed to us, who we really try to do sort of this household level transformation. But yeah, I mean, map speaks for itself. The first project up there was a complete streets project along Minor Avenue. I think the total cost was a little over 20 million. TCC contributed about 1.5. Our projects 2 and 3 are an energy and water efficiency program. 4 and 5 are a single and multifamily solar project. 6 is an urban forestry project, and 7 is like an organic food distribution program. Then in round 4, we're expanding to add a zero emission bus acquisition, which is actually a callback to our original proposal that we had to drop when we got our partial award. And then we're also adding an air quality monitoring program, which wasn't eligible in round 3, but it was in round 4.
Awesome, thanks, Grant. And for those of you that might be new to the program, this 5 square mile limit that Grant mentioned, I don't know if that will change in the next round. Like Jerry said earlier, the round 5 draft guidelines will come out in the next couple of weeks. So really any day now. And you will have an opportunity as members of the public and also previous grantees, of course, input is also very much valued to provide feedback on those types of requirements. And it is something that is sometimes a difficult balance in that this program is designed to, benefit, kind of define communities and be able to reach all the residents of a community and, kind of concentrate some of those benefits into the most vulnerable communities and historically polluted and marginalized communities. But at the same time, I think Grant's point about sprawl and just the sometimes decentralized and disconnected nature of some communities is also worth considering. So appreciate that comment. And there's still time to provide input on the round 5 guidelines and provide more thoughts, including in the next few moments here. Grant, did you want to share anything else?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure if I see there's a few questions that I'm happy to answer if we have time right now. And about the whole 5 square mile area, Jerry and Sarah, and I'm sure everybody from SGC, they have the impossible task of creating a very specifically tailored program to apply across the largest state and most diverse state in the country. So hats off to them for doing their best. There's a million things I could pick apart that make sense in one community and don't make sense in another. So that's why I've always enjoyed the flexibility of the program itself. So I think that's actually one of the biggest lessons learned for me was reading about it on paper and the guidelines. You can self-select out a lot of things. Like you might think you're not allowed to do certain things, but I definitely encourage you to always ask questions directly to SGC to make sure that's the case, because more often than not, they're interested in seeing if exceptions can be made. And I won't speak, for SGC, but I happen to know that the funding source for their future rounds of funding is slightly different than the previous round. So there may also be more opportunity for flexibility in certain areas, but that's not up to me. I'm not the governor, sadly. Alrighty, what department am I in? I am in the city manager's office. I think that was absolutely essential from a city perspective, because we had to loop in public works, community planning, who else? Parks and Rec. There was just a whole bunch of, there's probably like 15, 18 city staff who I worked with pretty regularly. Not to mention a lot of the documents required for TCC, like just like administratively to be submitted are documents that are like on behalf of the organization, which means city manager. So I had a lot of access to the city manager, which made getting those things done a lot easier, as opposed to if I was in a department. So again, you know, that every city is different. Stockton's a bigger city than a lot of people think. We're actually the 11th largest in California. So our city, you know, being in the city manager's office can be a little more significant, I suppose, and maybe like a larger city compared to like a smaller town. But I thought it was really important just from like a centrally organized position. And I should also point out we don't have an office of sustainability. So if you did have an office of sustainability, that's what I would think would be the ideal point person. I kind of became like the quasi office of sustainability, just to get this thing over the finish line. And I would think most cities probably place their sustainability offices at like the city manager level, because of the sort of citywide nature of the work that's done as far as the environment's concerned. And then I saw, who are your main partners and collaborators? Oh, we had a really robust group of nonprofits. So, you know, I really saw the city as a pass-through. I mean, that really clear to our community partners, which I think went a long way in building trust. The city was not interested in taking all this money for itself. It was always about, you know, we wanted to fund minor avenue, certainly, but other than that, the entire budget went toward, you know, community sponsored projects. We were just acting as the administrative head, because the program requires that I think it only requires that the city be involved. I don't think the city has to be the lead. It's just that it has to be like a partner, or like you have to like submit a letter of support or whatever. So we were just the largest administrative entity. So everybody kind of agreed that it made sense that we lead the collaborative effort. So that's kind of how we ended up in that position. A lot of right place, right time. I think you'll find that across a lot of implementation grantees. My understanding is that a planning grant does not need to be awarded prior, but that it's very common because it's a really complicated program that, you know, the planning grant gives you a lot of runway to sort of sort out how you're going to go for implementation. But I would defer to like Jerry or Sarah or any other staff member to maybe give a definitive answer on that. I don't know if it was already answered in the chat.
Yeah, that's the case, Grant, I think. And then historically, we're seeing now that the awardees, implementation grant awardees, were past planning grant awardees. So there is a link there, but there is no requirement to have one before the other. So.
Yep. And I will say, the planning grant is obviously incredibly advantageous, but you do really need to think through and use that time like really strategically. The city of Stockton, I would say, if there's, speaking just from the administrative lead position, thinking back to round 3, I had desperately wished we had spent more time in our planning grant creating actual project ideas. The strategic neighborhood or the sustainable neighborhood plan was really important, but in my mind, that probably should have been like the halfway point of planning. And then we should have spent a good amount of time in the planning phase, like actually creating the projects we were interested in, or at least coming up with concepts and aligning the partners. In our case, we basically ended planning, and then they said, okay, you have 3 months to do an implementation grant. And we essentially started from like complete scratch as far as like any sort of project concept was concerned. There's a 50% leverage requirement, or at least there was, for round 3 and 4. It is pretty hard to find that amount of money on, you know, 2 or 3 months notice. So I definitely think thinking ahead, like using the planning grant to really think ahead as to what projects you think could be submitted in implementation should definitely be like a really important part of the calculus. Like it's important to engage the community and hear directly from them. At the same time, you want to use that time to like actually get some project concepts going that align with what you're hearing from folks and, you know, sort of the data and all that. Let's see what else. Oh, I see Sarah noted. Yeah, I forgot that actually. It's been so long. The planning grant isn't it like up to 10 square miles or something, or no?
There's no cap on the planning grant size.
Yeah, so it can be a lot bigger. When you say leverage, do you mean match? Yeah, sort of. I think they kind of use that term interchangeably. I guess the only difference I would point out is they have sort of an added requirement that the leverage be a project that incorporates TCC money. So I think it's something like of the 50%, 10% can come from standalone leverage. but the other 40% has to be considered like money leveraged as part of a project. So in other words, like when we did Minor Avenue, what we did was we included TCC funding in the Minor Avenue project, which then made it the entire project be considered a leveraged project. So then that's how we met that $14 million leverage threshold. Again, sorry if things may have changed, but that was our reality in round 3.
Let me jump in on the leverage funding question for a second. We do, for implementation grant, require a significant amount of leverage funding, but we are much more flexible than I think most other programs in what counts as leverage. So any other grant counts, whether it's state, federal, any private source of funding, you can consider staff time that's being leveraged and not being billed to the grant as leverage funding from any entity. Any in-kind donations all count. And so the technical assistance providers can help you identify sources. It's not like you have to just allocate that much money to the grant. And yes, but definitely appreciate the reminder to start thinking about that in advance. And there may be some changes coming for the leverage funding requirements in this next guidelines update. So we really appreciate your feedback during that period on that requirement. But yes, leverage and match, I think, are sort of the same word here.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess speaking from like a city perspective, I'm sure you all are kind of thinking the same thing, like adding up all those other forms of leverage can go a long way, certainly, but at least the way the city of Stockton interpreted it was we need to sort of find like another project of significance that TCC could like act as like a force multiplier for, I think was kind of the idea, or at least that's what we were told way back when. So it's kind of like for Minor Avenue, again, for us, it's like it really turned into this like green complete streets project because we were able to include the TCC money. So like really changed the project, which was really cool. So but yeah, always excited to see the guidelines changing. I know I'll be giving feedback each time. They love hearing my detailed lists of all the things that I think need to be changed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Grant. And definitely feel free to stick around if you'd like. I'm sure other folks on the call would love to hear your thoughts on things, maybe in the breakout rooms and so on. But if you do have to leave, that's totally fine as well. We really appreciate you taking this time and sharing your experience with everyone on the call today.
Yeah, happy to be here. And I think I'll have to head out maybe a little after 2, but I'll put my email in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out with any questions. So just make sure you CC, Jerry and Sarah. I wouldn't want to mislead everybody about the program and go down a rabbit hole. So
amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I do want to just start to address some of the comments. Yeah, I think Sarah just responded regarding the eligible co-applicants. We can go back to that list actually, just so you can see that these are some of the types of organizations that can be eligible co-applicants. And I believe that actually, I know there's certain businesses and corporations here. The main thing is that a private business cannot apply alone, and there is a requirement essentially for a local government to be involved, and that does include, I believe, federally recognized tribal governments. There's some nuance there that we can get into in the breakout rooms and so on if folks have specific questions about that, but just wanted to go back to the eligible applicant types and noting that for each grant application, there is a lead applicant as well as co-applicants designated. So what we've seen is traditionally the city government often functions as the lead applicant. And if we look at the list of prior grants, traditionally it's been a city government with the expansion to unincorporated communities. In round 4, we saw county governments becoming more involved, as well as tribal governments becoming more involved. And that's, but either way, the public agency has tended to be the lead applicant for the reasons Grant mentioned, especially in the implementation grant, just because there is a lot of administration that is involved. And, I think SGC and the TA team, we try to reduce the administrative burden as much as possible. But when you're dealing with these tens of millions of dollars, there is inherently some degree of capacity needed for that. But I did want to just also point out that we've had some nonprofits, particularly in Los Angeles, a larger nonprofit fiscal sponsor, Community Partners, has been a lead applicant now on 2 grants in partnership with the city of Los Angeles and in different portions of the very large city. So I do want to point out that it doesn't have to be the public agency at the lead. And certainly in developing the vision and so on, SGC likes to see the community, the grassroots community organizations involved in that vision development and involved in the application development in a really deep way. And so with that, I did want to move us along into our interactive Jamboard session. And so we are going to use this as a large group discussion. There are 77 people in the meeting at the moment. So we recognize that we may not be able to get to every single question necessarily that during the meeting today, but we will be following up with more information if there's anything we can't kind of directly respond to right now. But what we're going to do is use a tool called a Jamboard to give you all a chance to ask questions, potentially uplift questions, and make comments on some of the things that we've talked about so far. So the first kind of main goal is going to be just reflecting and sharing your impressions or your experience on the TCC program. We recognize that some of you have not maybe participated in TCC or heard much about it before today, whereas others may have actually applied for the grant perhaps even multiple times and for multiple grant types. So we'd like to hear just your initial impressions, both positive in terms of strengths and opportunities, maybe negative or constructive, but areas for improvement in terms of challenges, concerns, or just other comments. And then we will also go into a little bit more kind of thinking ahead to round 5 if you are planning to apply during round 5 next year, and talking about some of the distinctions, differences, and specific things to prepare for, whether you're focusing on the planning grant or the implementation grant. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and post a link here in the chat to our Jamboard. And then I will once again start sharing the screen so that folks can take a look at the Jamboard as we begin to build it out. And so I just put the link in the chat. You should all be able to access the board now, and I will share my screen once again. And feel free to raise your hand or in the chat point out if you are having any trouble accessing the Jamboard. But you can see there's this title slide here, and on slide 2, we're going to do a little tutorial so we can kind of all get used to using the Jamboard. Can you all see this this Jamboard basic screen here? If not, feel free to jump in. But basically what we will do here today is start by just practicing how to use the Jamboard. One of the ways you can provide input or feedback is with a sticky note. So you go and click on this button here. You can type in test. It'll create a sticky note, and you can just keep adding them with different colored backgrounds if you'd like. The color doesn't really matter at this point. And then with this, you can move this around, shrink, increase, and great job. Yes, definitely good to see folks putting this into action here. So feel free to get started in number 1. With number 2, you'll see box number 3 has these Move Me stickers. So these are all stickers, and you can just kind of practice moving these around. You can increase the size, decrease the size if you'd like. And then last but not least, since we do have a lot of folks involved in the meeting right now, and we might have some similar thoughts, instead of repeating the same comment or same question, if you want to prioritize something, if you think something's really urgent, you can add an exclamation mark. If you want to clarify something, and I not follow my own directions, the reaction icons can go here, but these are the different reactions that you can make to the particular sticky notes. So any questions or comments for now? Just give you all a few moments, maybe another minute or two until 2 p.m. To just practice using the Jamboard. And again, you can also add new sticky notes with this button on the left. I see some folks trying out the invisible ink here. That's great to use as well, if anything comes to mind. But I do think, if we want to, and we do have, there are some pen tools and things like that that might, that might stay on the board. So let's try to avoid maybe using those sorts of icons or tools for today. Yeah, you can actually erase those, which is great to see. But it looks like folks are getting the hang of the Jamboard. So we will move on now to frame number 3, board number 3 here. And if you could all just follow me with this next frame button over to frame 3 out of 7. What we would like you all to do is, using these Post-its and then using the reaction icons where applicable, just share any sort of strengths or opportunities that you see in the program so far, or any challenges or concerns, or if there's anything that may be just a comment that maybe doesn't fall into one or the 2 categories. And yeah, please avoid changing the background or clearing the frame. But I see folks are already starting to add comments. And at this point also, you all have been very, pretty quiet so far for this number of people. So I think, if you'd like to, come off mute and share a question or a comment verbally, you can feel free to do so as well. But we may ask you to mute if there are too many folks speaking at once. Another thing you'll see, it sort of automatically will add a Post-it note in the same spot. So if it looks like yours is buried, you can feel free to move things around, increase size, decrease size. See that folks are already starting to add a bunch of comments here, and it's great to see so much activity here. I do want to start, with the challenges to just get, kind of forefront those. I see leverage funding as a challenge. So that's certainly something we are aware of. Seeing also that the leverage funding being used during the grant term can make it difficult, especially when you've already maybe invested a lot into a project that is related to what you want to fund with the TCC grant. And that it's hard to create partnerships, maybe hard to deal with the the speed or lack thereof among the city government. So that's, yeah, those are all, you know, important points here. I see a hand raised in the chat as well from, is it Kest?
It is Kest. So if I'm clicking and nothing's happening, what am I doing wrong?
Let's see. Are you clicking on this button here?
Yes.
Okay, and then does this pop up or no?
No.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what the issue may be. I mean, what I can do actually here is just go ahead and add whatever you wanted to mention. So feel free to.
Something important. I'm attempting to use it and I haven't been able to so far. So I'll just keep trying. Thanks.
Did a separate web browser open up when you click the link?
No, nothing happened.
Okay, in the chat, he dropped the link to open a Jamboard session. So if you go back to Riley's comment with the link, and then you should be able to open up a new web browser, and then you should be able to have that feature to add the comments and stuff. It's not through Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Sarah just put the link in there in the chat as well. So yeah, it's with that link that you can kind of follow along. Yeah, the Zoom video is just kind of following along. So just seeing some of the other challenges here, we're seeing, you know, it's difficult having multiple community partners as co-applicants for procurement purposes. That, you know, that's really interesting point. And I'm wondering, is the issue there, is the issue the city's or the agency's procurement requirements, or is there a challenge of things that you want to procure later and already having the communities involved? Would anyone like to kind of elaborate on that challenge, perhaps in the chat or on the call? And yes, feel free to speak. I apologize. Is it Sejal?
Yeah, hi. I have actually a different question. I don't have a comment on the last question. So that's okay. I can wait.
Oh, no problem. No, I'd say just go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm with Community Health Councils based in Los Angeles. And so in terms of round 5, is it that this is our first round that we would be applying for? And is it a completely new round? Because I noticed it's a planning and implementation and then a technical assistance grant, right? Is that the 3 sort of grants that are within one round? And I think the TA round just closed or is about to close for round 1. And so are you guys starting this over or for round 5, or how does that work?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. So every round is brand new. So the applicants who are awarded in round 4 that just happened will now start their either 2-year or 5-year grant term, depending on how long, which type of grant it is. There's some other associated things that happen with that. So there is technical assistance for evaluation. There's technical assistance for implementation. You don't really need to worry about all of that until you get to that point. What's starting right now is round 5, which will be a whole new set of planning grants and implementation grants with brand new technical assistance. So all of the application TA happens every round. And then what I think will be talked about a little bit later is this presentation and additional presentations that are coming are to help get ready for round 5. And that's actually a new thing that we added this year. But it hasn't, it will all be starting again in February when the guidelines are released, and then the NOFA application will be released in March. Did that answer your question?
That was great. So in February, we will be notified about the planning grant. and the implementation grant both?
Yeah, they all happen at the same time. So one set of one notice of funding availability will be released that will contain instructions for both the planning grants and the implementation grants. The timelines are the same for the application period. You just decide which grant you're pursuing. There's obviously different requirements and instructions for each one, but they all happen on the same timeline. So if you want to pursue a planning grant and then an implementation grant, you would first just focus on the planning grant, see if you get an award, you would then do the planning grant, and then in a future round, you would apply for implementation on whatever timeline works for you.
Okay, so there are going to be future rounds as well.
Yes, so we have funding for at least round 5, which is this upcoming one, and round 6. In the past, TCC has only been awarded funding on an annual basis, which was tough because it didn't provide that guarantee that there would be future rounds. We were really excited to get 3 rounds of funding at once this time. So we got funding for rounds 4, 5, and 6. And hopefully that will continue on, but it's up to the legislature to allocate the funding for the program.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So the max and minimum question, I think the details on that, I would wait till the guidelines come out, but generally the maximum for the implementation grants is 35 million, which is what it was last round and will be this round. And the max for planning is 300,000. There's no concrete minimums for either of those. At least there haven't been in the past. So you don't have to propose that full amount, but for the implementation grants, we do generally see the applicants tend to propose large amounts to really get that sort of transformative effect of multiple projects and programs working together. But yeah, we really appreciate feedback on those topics too. So definitely that's something that during the guidelines public comment period, we would appreciate hearing about.
Thanks, Sarah. And just wanted to go back to the Jamboard here and note that we have received a couple more comments and questions, starting with the challenges again. So the new challenges folks have listed here. It's just that there's a lot of work up front that's unfunded. We acknowledge that's a big challenge and sometimes a barrier for folks. That is one reason that we try to help supplement some of the work with technical assistance, but I know that is still a challenge to submit the full application, and that I see policy continues to get in the way of progress. That's definitely unfortunate to hear. I think we all would like to see policy enhancing and enabling progress, but certainly something that we can talk more about. And did see some strengths here as well, and folks are highlighting the flexibility, the ability to engage the community, and requirement to engage the community and build trust and build collaboration, and use creativity. So that's all great to hear. And then in the other comments, I see folks noting TA should start sooner. I mean, we're certainly trying to kind of do an introduction to that TA now and in the next couple of months with those early 2023 workshops. But we will be starting TA as soon as possible around the application period beginning. So certainly look out for all of those next steps. And just some of the questions here that we see. Have there been any affordable housing projects that are not traditional through the TCAC, the Tax Credit Allocation Committee? Do they have to adhere to AHSC, Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program? That's a pretty specific question that I think we can, we'll certainly note and try to provide a detailed answer to. The short answer is that the guidelines may be shifting slightly to go beyond the AHSC program, but in the previous rounds, they have had to adhere to AHSC in terms of the baseline requirements of that AHSC program. And for these questions, as well as the battery storage eligible type of question, we would encourage you to ask that again in a few minutes when we have our breakout rooms, because we will have some rooms that are dedicated to the implementation grant where we can talk about some of these things more. Some more big picture questions that are listed here include, what are some suggestions that applicants should look out for in a TCC round 5 application? I think just starting early and starting and really kind of solidifying your partnerships and your project area as soon as possible. Just trying to understand, I think specifically among those partnerships of the community organizations, community partners in general, getting a sense of what type of improvements they might want to see, where they would like to see them is a good place to start. And also to look out for those round 5 draft guidelines in the next couple of weeks to get a sense of how the program may be shifting slightly. And I think there is a similar question here about how do you take advantage of existing TA sources and resources. And we will talk about that in just a moment, actually. Before we do our breakout rooms, we are going to discuss just some of the next steps that you can take. And with that, I'm actually going to look ahead to some of these other Jamboards. I think we'll be using these in the breakout sessions, but good to see folks have kind of stayed on this one here. We really appreciate all of your comments, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and actually return us to the slideshow. And in doing so, be able to sort of reintroduce some of the important next steps and the timeline for this next round. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael from Farallon Strategies to just take us through these next couple of steps before our breakout sessions.
Great, thank you, Riley. It was great to see all those comments coming in on the Jamboard. We're capturing all of that. Obviously, if you have follow-up comments, we're here to help with that. So that being said, I put in the chat a link to the TCC TA intake survey. This is a really important way for the TA team and for SGC to understand what some initial concepts are, what some of the parameters are. It really helps us understand what you might be headed for. And if it's another aspect of it is that if the TCC program isn't the best option for you, one of the things the TA team can do is help you find some of the other grant programs that are out there that are relevant for the projects and programs that you're thinking about. And so that's one of the things that we're here to do with you, is to make sure that you're successful and support your decision-making process. So please do the intake survey. And obviously, without the grant guidelines being publicly available right now, it's getting ahead of the curve and really getting you prepared for this next round of discussions. The TA team, we have a number of support providers here to support decision-making on your side and to help you understand the relevancy and the potential of the projects that you're putting forward. We have a couple of contact names here. Riley, of course, who's been helping to facilitate the meeting today, myself and my contact information. There's a number of topically specific TA providers. For example, our team at Farallon Strategies helps to support the adaptation and resilience discussions, but we also do broader TA. There's a number of other TA providers that are specifically focused as well, along with the broader TA providers. We'll help you find the right folks to engage in conversation. The next slide. So next steps. Well, we've talked a little bit about geography, and defining the project area is a really important part of thinking about the projects that you might have to put forward into the TCC program. And so you can access the TCC mapping tool under the program guidelines here. I don't know if Christina or others could put a link in the chat to the mapping tool. That would be very helpful. Think about your partners. Anna and Riley talked a little bit about the potential partners and the preferred partners from prior award rounds. You might also make sure to take a look at this in the next grant guidelines that are coming out in the next few weeks in the draft guidelines. And this is one place where if you do have questions or comments in the draft guidelines, that would be a really nice place to inquire about partnership models and other organizations and public agencies you might be working with. Also, identify your project strategies. Develop a vision statement. Get ahead of the curve here. Make sure you're building those partnerships, coming to alignment about the work that you want to do ahead. And then include something that reduces or prevents greenhouse gas emissions, obviously is a core focus of the program, very important part of this. But TCC is designed around being a holistic solution for community initiatives. So don't just focus on the greenhouse gas emissions. This program is designed to benefit the community as a whole and really bring resources in that are intended to do that. So I think that's the short on some of the next steps. And please do keep a look out for those draft guidelines to come out in the next couple of weeks. Review them. Please do comment on them. SGC, per Grant's comments from Stockton, is very receptive to reflecting on the needs of the grant applicants and folks in the community of practice in California. So please do be involved. So we're going to pivot over to the breakout sessions now. So we've had 4 different rooms that we've set up. We've got the main room. So stay here in this main room. Don't go to the breakouts. If you are new to TCC or unsure about the grant type that you're looking for, we have room 1, which is to discuss whether you're interested in applying to a planning grant. That stage 1, thinking through how to prepare for implementation. Room 2 is around applying for the implementation grant. This is your first time in particular. Some of the nuts and bolts about what we might look for in that. Room 3 is around focused on previous applicants for the implementation grant. So an opportunity for folks that are well seasoned in the implementation grant application process to engage in some discussion together with both the TA team and with SGC. So I think we can put if you go to the bottom, there's a breakout rooms tab where you can, oh, sorry, go ahead, Riley.
Yeah, Michael, sorry, I was just going to add a couple of quick things. Thank you, Michael. But yes, before we split up into the breakout rooms, I did want to mention that we will be on the line. I know that the meeting officially ends at 2:30, but we will be on the line for at least a few more minutes. I know I'll be on the line actually until 3 p.m. So if folks still have questions, we'll leave the breakout rooms open a little bit after 2:30, and also can reunite in the main room for any final questions as well until 3 p.m. Another important point is that I know some of you had mentioned on the Jamboard the challenge with not having funding to actually apply. So for your applications, if you do have a community organization that maybe isn't ready to commit to a full grant term especially for the implementation grant, it's a 5-year grant term. If you have a community organization that, is kind of wants to contribute to that community vision and maybe isn't ready to commit to that large of a term, they can actually serve as a local TA provider. So if you have colleagues in nonprofit organizations that would like to help with the application, we actually have funds to essentially hire them to help write the application and contribute to the application development. And last quick thing I'll mention is that if you previously began an application for the implementation grant, I think it would be great if you could join room 3 as well. I know some folks on the line may have not applied already, but if you've had that experience with the implementation grant, I'd say go ahead and join room 3. And if you are just applying for the first time or interested in that implementation funding, that's probably room 2. So I am open the rooms now. They're now all open at the moment. We'll go ahead and can go ahead and assign yourselves to each of these rooms. So again, room 1 is for folks interested in the planning grant. Room 2 is if you're interested in the implementation grant, and room 3 if you are someone who's already started down that road of the implementation grant. And if you're not sure which grant type, or you just want to learn more about the program in general, you can stick around in the main room.